first time that hops have been included in the agenda. I assume that's a reflection of the attention that hops have been getting lately in the beer industry. And that is, in our view, a consequence of a fundamental shift in the beer industry. A fundamental shift away from chasing efficiencies and costs towards making flavorful, tasteful, aromatic beers. The hop industry is actually a very small industry. In 2014, there were just under 48,000 hectares of hops grown worldwide. We think that the total value of the crop amounts to roughly 800 million euro. There's only one crop per year. Harvest takes place in March in the southern hemisphere and in September in the northern hemisphere. It takes 3 years for a newly planted field to give a full yield, and 10 to 12 years to develop a new hop variety, at least by traditional methods. Genetic engineering has so far been excluded from hop research because of concerns by the brewing industry and consumers. There are approximately 4,000 hop farming operations in the world, and Germany and the United States account for roughly 80% of the worldwide hop production, so a very, very heavy concentration of hop production in these two countries. Roughly 4 marketing organizations account for 90% of the worldwide traded hops. There are some exceptions to that. There are hops grown, for example, in South Africa, which go directly to the SAB breweries in South Africa. Likewise, Japan grows some hops, or Argentina. They go straight to the brewing industry without being channeled through the international hop trade. About 98% of all hops produced worldwide end up in beer. So the fate of the hop industry is totally linked to how the beer industry performs. We have another factor that comes into play, and that's the hopping rate, so the amount of hops you use to make a hectoliter of beer. And there is a very, very wide spectrum possible here. We have small, low hopping rates of something like 50 grams of dried raw hops per hectoliter in a mainstream lager beer that it would be produced in China or the United States or Brazil. And we can go up to 1,000 grams and even higher for some of the hop-forward IPAs that you see in many markets appearing now. And that makes estimating the total demand for hops actually very difficult. In any case, with the growth of craft-style beers, or hop-forward beers, as we like to call them also, at the expense of mainstream lagers, hop demand grows more strongly recently than beer output. And another phenomenon we are seeing is a tremendous proliferation of varieties. Whereas 5 to 6 years back, we were dealing with something like 40, 50 hop varieties worldwide, we are now approaching something like 200. So if you look at overall demand, a combination of beer output and the hopping rate, this is the picture that we get. In the 70s and 80s, hop demand increased because beer, mainly lager, was conquering the world as a popular beverage. It then entered a period of stagnation, with beer output still growing, but hopping rates and hop efficiencies increasing in the brewing process. And for the last 4 years, a significant increase now in hop demand. Again, we are here looking at a very global picture of hops produced worldwide. I said before, there are many different varieties grown, and actually you would have to do this analysis for each variety individually. How has hop supply now responded to these demand changes? First of all, the hop acreage has declined for many years, and the reason for that is mainly also productivity gains, higher yielding varieties, and varieties with more alpha acid contents and oil contents. The numbers of farms has reduced over that period, while the average farm size continues to increase. Since 2010, there has actually been a change in focus away from high alpha hops towards aroma hops, and that is leading to efficiency or productivity losses in the sense of how many kilos of alpha or how many kilos of oil you produce per hectare. So there's a need for more hopland. In the US, the craft segment now is driving the hop industry. The craft style beers account for roughly 10% of the US beer production, but they need and consume more hops than the 90% mainstream beers. And they are really starting to set the agenda in the US in terms of what varieties are grown, how much acres are needed. This has an influence in Germany. The United States was always the provider, traditionally the provider of bittering hops to the world. This demand is now shifting to Germany. And that is, of course, also aided by the recent changes in currency and exchange rates between the US dollar and the euro. If demand of hops continues as it has in the last couple of years with these tremendous increases, it's going to be very difficult for the hop world to keep up with that increased or that pace of demand increase. Let's look at the alpha acid balance, which is essentially the net between supply and demand. And as I've said, we had already a significant deficit in 2014, brewing year 2014, of some 1,700 tons of alpha. We have again a deficit of close to 1,000 tons of alpha in 2015. So far, we are still using up this inventory that had accumulated in those years, but there's a significant discrepancy, imbalance in the varieties. While there's a tremendous demand for aroma varieties that is not fully satisfied, there is still an excess of old inventory in bitter hops that is keeping a lid on prices in the high alpha segment. What to expect in the next 2 to 3 growing seasons. The forward contracting by the brewing industry is essential to secure supply and to send the right signals to growers. This is becoming a conundrum for the industry because experimenting with new beer styles, new flavors, new hop varieties makes it very difficult to predict future demand. At the same time, hop growers are not willing to invest in new varieties, in new harvesting equipment, and in their operations without some security of being able to sell their hops and recover their investment. As I said before, in our view, beer flavor will be the dominant trend, and that will outweigh trends towards further efficiency gains and cost reductions.